This is Undaunted.Life, a man's podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Thompson. Let's get into it. All right, guys, we've got a couple of special guests on the podcast today. We have Martin Suarez and Ian Frisch. So Martin worked as an FBI special agent for 23 years, and he holds the record for the most time spent continuously undercover, and he has infiltrated criminal organizations across the United States, Europe, Asia, Central and South America, and the Caribbean. And he is a 6-time recipient of the FBI's Special Achievement Award, a 4-time recipient of the Department of Justice's Outstanding Law Enforcement Officer of the Year Award, and received the Federal Law Enforcement Officers Association Lifetime Achievement Award. And then he retired from the FBI in 2011. And Ian has been a writer for The New Yorker, The New York Times, New York Magazine, and Esquire, among many other publications. And they combined to write the new book called Inside the Cartel: How an Undercover FBI Agent Smuggled Cocaine, Laundered Cash, and Dismantled a Colombian Narco-Empire. And so this was a really incredible interview and a really incredible book. I will mention from the beginning that Martin does have ALS, and so his speech can be a little bit labored, and he lost his train of thought a couple of times, but it's all good. You can still understand what he's talking about, and also Ian would hop in several times to give a little bit more color and context to certain things. But there's so many details in the book that we didn't get to in the interview, but we did get into, okay, what made you want to join the military, and then what made you want to transition into the FBI? What did the FBI see early in you that you would potentially be a good person to go undercover? Because at the time, they weren't really doing a lot of undercover. They didn't really have a lot of tradecraft in terms of doing undercover work. How he ended up getting into drug smuggling and how that's actually very close to what he learned in the Navy. So that was pretty interesting. But then the Medellin cartel and other cartels, when did he feel like he had their trust? And then we talk about this enormous bust where he was told by the cartels that they needed to smuggle 3,000 kilos of cocaine, which was about $500 million in street value, and how it ended up being smuggled, but then it was taken over by the FBI, but it didn't implicate him. We got into, when to wear a wire, not to wear a wire. When, his alter ego, whenever he was, infiltrating and smuggling, was Manny, but he's Martin. And so how do you transition from Manny to Martin and back and forth? He's got a wife and 2 sons. How did that work out? There were times when he would run into contacts from the smuggling world while he was out to dinner with his wife, right? How do you handle those situations and that type of a thing? Eventually, he switched over from doing drug smuggling to money laundering. It's a different thing, a different part of the process, but still very, very dangerous. We do talk about some times where he felt like he may have been made, where there were some threats against him, and it was like, okay, I may have been made in this entire thing. We talk about the wrap up, the investigation. There were like 50 indictments that were a part of his case, and just the amount of intel that he was able to garner and gather during this time period was substantial. And then we get into at the end where he's out of the drug smuggling game. He's still in the FBI, but he's not doing the stuff against the cartels anymore. And he gets back from a run. He sits down on a chair on his porch, and then he hears something behind him, turns around, and there's a revolver pointed at his chest, a guy with a ski mask on, and it's a sicario that was sent by the cartels to take him out. Yeah, so we get into that. Make sure you stick around for that story. So guys, without further ado, let's get into it. Martin and Ian, welcome to the show, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Kyle.
Yeah, I'm absolutely thrilled to have you guys on because I just got done reading your book. And so this is actually the second undercover book that I've read so far this year. So this one's called Inside the Cartel: How an Undercover FBI Agent Smuggled Cocaine, Laundered Cash, and Dismantled a Colombian Narco-Empire. This was like the easiest acceptance of all time. I get about 25 or 30 pitches for every one person I can have on the show. But this one's easy. It's like not only do you get to read that book, but you get to talk to 2 people. So this is awesome. So I'm excited to chat with you guys. I want to start the discussion on the book with actually the author's note, okay? This is a work of nonfiction. I have, however, elected to use pseudonyms for specific individuals. These are dangerous people, many of whom are fugitives or out of prison. I'm taking a serious risk in publishing this book. The cartel never forgets. So first question, what the heck are you doing, Martin? I mean, come on. Those guys are still out there. They say they can reach out and touch you whenever they want. What's wrong with you? Come on.
So this happened. The book covers a stretch of 6 years between late 1980s and early 1990s. So it's been over 30 years. And so for a lot of reasons I felt compelled to write this memoir with this fantastic co-writer I have. So he made it very easy. So there you go. And this is all true. I surprised us to see that there are many stories like this out there.
But I will say, Kyle, I asked Martin, should we be scared? Because I was like, dude, like,
it's a good
the
question.
villain of the book just got out of prison. Like, he's back in Colombia. He's running for public office. Like, should we be scared? And Martin was like, the hatchet's been buried. I won the war. We'll be fine. If they wanted me dead, I'd be dead by now.
Right. Right.
It's so interesting because whenever I read Pale Horse earlier this year about a guy that infiltrated, KKK and neo-Nazis and different things like that, I asked him the same question, basically, what's wrong with you, you crazy person? And he literally kind of said the same thing, like if you can say it this way, there is honor among thieves. And
Right.
like those guys realized they got. And it's like, hey, it's like in poker. Can you really be mad if you get outplayed? You can be mad if you didn't get the river card that you were hoping for. But if you just got flat out outplayed in the hand, that's a different story. But for you, Martin, you obviously didn't start in the FBI. You did have a childhood and everything else before that. But for you, you made the decision to go the United States military route. You joined the Navy. And so let's just talk about, why you decided to raise your right hand and say that you were going to protect this country from enemies, foreign and domestic, and then how you transferred into the FBI.
So it's more basic than the swearing in. My dad and I used to watch a lot of epic movies about the Navy, and he admired the naval officers, and then we used to watch a lot of episodes of the FBI that was there, started there in the 1960s. So he admired them too. So I wanted to be what he couldn't be because of time and whatnot. So I had the opportunity to join as he joined in, to go to Second World War.
And Martin too, he
go
wanted
ahead.
to follow. He wanted to follow in his dad's footsteps.
Yeah.
His dad was in the army in World War II, but growing up, they idolized the Navy. And Martin was like, I want to be a Navy officer because that was my dad's secret dream. Just like his dad's secret dream was to become an FBI agent. So Martin allowed his father to live vicariously through him. But Martin rose the ranks of the Navy pretty quick. Within 8 years, he became a surface warfare officer. He was a big dog. And they almost wanted him to come stay on and become a captain of a ship, but Martin had other plans. He wanted to be an FBI agent.
Right, and I think it's really interesting. There's a through point of the entire book, which is the relationship with your father. It's like you constantly keep coming back to it. It's like you're tethered to that relationship, and we'll tease that out a little bit more later. But I do want to read. I'm going to be reading several quotes from the book. And guys, just so you know from the beginning, you're just going to have to go out and get this book yourself. There's so many details and stories. We're not even going to be able to cover a tenth of them in the book. So go out and make sure you get your own copy of Inside the Cartel. But let me read this quote here. My superiors at the FBI thought I was a perfect fit and asked if I would be willing to go undercover. I wouldn't be the first FBI agent to do it, but if I was successful, I would be the first to breach the cartels and make them believe I was one of them. I wanted to be an agent who made the prosecution's case airtight. I wanted to make history. I didn't hesitate. And so obviously there have been tens of thousands of people that have made their way into and out of the FBI. They've had short careers, long careers, everything in between. Undercover is just a different kind of an animal. And so I guess from the beginning, Martin, let's just talk about how were you even evaluated for this? And then in the era that you got into Undercover, what was the training even like? Because it was fairly early on in kind of this clandestine, operation stuff via the FBI, wasn't it?
Yes. So I got started really when I got to my dress squad. My supervisor, knowing that I had Navy experience on ships, he asked me if I was able to take a fast boat from Miami to Bahamas for an operation. And I said, of course I can. And I took the boat out there. By default, I was involved in the undercover operation. So I was hooked right there. And then I came back and I was asked again to do boat operations. And before you knew it, I was negotiating directly with the cartel.
And I would say as well, the interesting thing here is identity is probably a word that comes to mind as you read through the book as well. Because at some point, you are Martin, but then you became Manny. And so obviously, in order to be a good undercover agent, if you don't believe your backstory and if you don't believe that you are Manny, it's going to be hard for you to convince other people to do that. Like even if you're in sales, if you don't believe in your product, it's going to be hard to sell it, right?
Exactly
And so
right.
for you, yeah. And so what was the process like for you, Martin, becoming Manny? Because that's not just like, oh, the FBI, gave you a clipboard and here's your name on it and here's all your fake IDs and everything like that. And they're like, hey, kind of talk with an accent. No, you really, in a way, Martin, had to become Manny.
Right. So Manny was a parallel persona to Martin. And everything was the same with the exception of the other part of the acting. But I became Manny through first getting my backstopping. The best backstopping you can have is the one you create based on your real persona. You shouldn't let somebody else create it for you because you don't know what's in the background of all that. So, got my alter ego in place and then started working undercover. And by the time, a year's time, I was feeling very comfortable. I never spoke about what I didn't know, and that was a strength.
And that's a huge part of working undercover in a deep capacity for a long period of time is making sure your alter ego isn't too different from who you really are in real life. When Martin went undercover, he was a smuggler, but he was Puerto Rican. His backstory was all the same. He lived in Miami. So when you become this other person, it's 80% yourself. It's just the intention that changes. Right. And sometimes you pick up on behavioral tactics used by cartel men, so then you can convince them that you are one of them. And that's what Martin was really good at. He could bring in his street smarts from growing up in Puerto Rico, and he could bring in his sort of like high level operational sort of awareness from the Navy or from being an FBI agent to convince these cartel guys, I'm legit, I'm a smuggler, I'm going to do this for you.
And
when there's a mirroring. Yeah, please.
It should be noted that during the time, late 1980s, the Caribbean corridor was the favorite route for the cartels as opposed to Mexico or straight into Miami. So when I was down there in the Caribbean, wherever I stuck my hand, I found a good case. So it was a target-rich environment.
Yeah, it certainly was. And you've already mentioned that you got into the smuggling game. I'll read this quote from the book. I had become a smuggler less than a year prior. I was the first FBI agent in history to be thrown into a long-term, deep undercover operation that targeted Colombia's most ruthless drug cartels. And so you're going to have to explain this to the guys in my audience, because most of us just work kind of a normal job. Maybe we started a business, maybe we work for somebody else, something like that. We wouldn't have the foggiest idea how to get into smuggling, right? And so here you are undercover. You have good support from the FBI, but there's kind of a little bit of this figure it out on the job, like on the job type training thing. But how do you go from Martin Suarez in the Navy to I am literally smuggling cocaine for the cartels?
So smuggling cocaine, especially in maritime operations, is no different from the Navy. So it was an easy transition from the Navy to smuggling because in the Navy you move missiles across the world. And you can call that kind of smuggling. The logistics is the same. And danger is the same, and the long hours, days and weeks and months out there as lonely as smuggling is. So it was an easy transition. You should always go with your experience and not divert from there. Otherwise, they're going to see you coming a mile away.
Well, Martin, tell them about having a source who taught you the ropes of being a smuggler, the behaviors needed and some of the ins and outs that made smugglers a specific type of breed. Talk about the source.
So as I started moving boats, I met a source through a couple of other agents. And this source was a personal pilot at that time, or a few years before I met him, the personal pilot for Rodrigo Gacha, alias the Mexican. He was a close associate, an equal to Pablo Escobar, and they got along really well, and he formed part of the Medellin cartel, together with a few others. So Pacho Herrera at the beginning, and so that source and his wife was connected prior to being married to my source. She was married to another pilot who was affluent rice grower and coffee grower in Colombia, turned smuggler, and the pilot introduced me to all these Colombian connections. He was really, really good, efficient, effective, and that whenever he introduced me, because he did, and she and his wife, they overlooked a lot of shortcomings that I had. So there is a lot of luck, but a lot of preparation. The best you prepare, the better luck you have.
Hey guys, real quick. I know a lot of you guys struggle with getting a consistent workout routine. So wherever you get to, whether that's the Globo gym or your home gym or even like a parking lot somewhere, you get there and then you don't know what to do. You get there and you're just like, well, what in the world am I supposed to do today? And you just kind of meander around, and maybe you're trying to get ready for like a mountain hunt in the fall, or you've got a mud race coming up, or you just want to be generally a strong and fit dude for normal everyday life, but you don't have a program that's tailored for you. I want you guys to stop wasting time at the gym or wherever you're working out and just settling for that same old routine that you've always done. It's time for you to get a guide that will help you reach your fitness goals. And that's why I want to introduce you to my friends over at Mountain Tough. Mountain Tough is a fitness and mental toughness app developed by military special operators and mountain hunters that's becoming a global movement for building mentally tough athletes on and off the mountain. So Mountain Tough is a native app ready to be downloaded on all platforms. So that includes iPhone, Android, Apple TV, and Roku. Once you sign up and download the app or access the website, you immediately have access to literally hundreds of exercise programs and thousands of workout videos. Thousands, okay? That includes structured hybrid strength and endurance programs, daily workouts, the full exercise library, mental toughness training, prehab and rehab, the Mountain Tough community and accountability, and a bunch of other stuff. And guys, you can use it all on the go, online or offline, no matter where you decide to train. Just getting started? No problem. They've got programs for beginners. Have minimal gear or no gear? All good. They have minimal gear and bodyweight programs. Wanting to get into or maintain elite level fitness like me? They've got you covered with programs for top tier athletes too. And guys, for a limited time, Mountain Tough is extending Undaunted Lifers like you an incredible offer. Go to mountaintough.com. That's MTNtough.com and enter the code Kyle when you sign up for a monthly plan to receive your first month free after your 14-day free trial. So for guys that aren't good at math, that is 6 weeks free to make sure this app is for you, and I'm sure it will be. That is 6 weeks free on the best-in-class physical and mental training app in the world. Stop wasting time. It's time to get real fitness results and let my friends at Mountain Tough guide the way. Again, go to MTN Tough. That's mountaintough.com, promo code Kyle. Well, I can't wait to tell all my Navy buddies that they're technically smugglers. So thank you for giving me that information. But obviously, you know, you were able to take those connections from your source and you were able to work those connections in a very effective way. Because it seemed like, you know, maybe I'm rushing the story in my head, but it seems like you gained the trust of the Medellin cartel pretty quickly because they entrusted you with a smuggling operation of 3,000 kilos of cocaine. And for financial perspective, that was about $500 million worth of cocaine in terms of like street value on the product. Right. So just take me through the process of like, okay, how did the cartel test you in order to see if you were trustworthy, not just as an individual, but also as like a legit smuggler? And then this also led to the FBI seizure of the cocaine, which was actually part of the plan from the beginning.
Right. So it just happened that I lost my train of thought with your question. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no problem. And so essentially it's, I mean, I'm trying to think even as like, it's hard to put myself in your shoes, but like, how do you get these people of this dangerous criminal empire to trust you, one, but then beyond that, to trust you with something to at least a civvy sounds insane. $500 million worth of cocaine.
Right. So, there was a lot of preparation and there were a ton of cases we don't cover in the book, Ian and I, because we didn't have enough space. But I did a lot of different operations that led these guys to believe that I was kosher, and that these operations were of the nature that we could work without letting any cocaine on the streets. So completing those operations I got like favors for the cartel. I gained their favor, and they started employing me more and more. Anytime there was a doubt, they would go to my pilot and his wife, and they would iron out everything. At that point, they got to the point where they didn't have to intercede for me because I started getting the whole thing and I could do it solo. The purpose of doing it solo is that your source doesn't have to testify at trial if you have a good UC or you good undercover to document everything. So the undercover would make the best witness.
Also, too, Kyle, you have to think about this from the cartel's perspective. They have so much product. They have so much cocaine that they want to get into the U.S., but it's hard to find good help. It's hard to find people who have technical expertise, who can chart a ship, who can fly a plane, who has the kind of logistical understanding of how to do this type of job. So they're always on the lookout for people who have this type of technical expertise. And like Martin said, he kind of piecemealed his skill to them over time, doing small jobs here, in a way that creates a honeypot. He wants them to start pitching him, do this bigger thing for us, please help us, whatever. So then by the time they get to the point of saying, we want you to transport $500 million worth of cocaine, they've already convinced themselves that he's legit and he's doing it. He's not begging them to do that job. And then on the back end, the FBI is continuously building their own set of assets and operational plans, so that when that ask does come through, they can go to Martin and say, we got 3 boats, we got surveillance, we got 25 guys, here's the plan. No drugs are going to hit the street. We're going to insulate you from risk in terms of being blamed for the seizure, and this is how it's going to go. Basically, the way that this goes down is that these cartel guys are the spectators of a magic trick, but they don't even know they're on the stage. And that's how a good operation in the undercover realm gets done.
When it seemed as well, like, and this came through in the book as well, if you came off as too eager, that's not going to look good, right?
Right.
So I liked how there were sometimes where like, hey, I can't do this. Like, I can't do this on this time. Like, y'all aren't my only client, like that type of a thing. Like, you weren't being rude, but that's how everybody in a business context, which again, they don't look at themselves necessarily as a criminal empire. They look at themselves as a business empire. That's how you talk to people like a sub or another company that you're working with. But all the while you're doing this smuggling, there's always this tension and transition between Martin Manny. But there was a day, and man, when I was reading this story, I literally was like, like it like took my breath away for a second because I was able to put myself there, even though I'm like the farthest thing from what you were doing. But you were on a date with your wife, and you ran into one of your smuggling contacts. And so you're on a date with your wife, and you're obviously on a date as Martin, not Manny. And you run into one of your contacts during Noche de San Juan, and I'll just let you take it from there. Like I was about to like go through the story, but you're with your wife, you're doing dinner, you're Martin, and you look up and you see a smuggling contact. Go.
So it was an easy transition because when I work undercover, I tell my bosses I'll accept this mission, but it will take time. If you expect me to get into this group in a day or a week, then I'm not your man. If you give me 6 months to a year, I'll infiltrate. So when I saw this guy, he was a high-ranking member of the cartel, especially specifically Cali, but he had some dealers with Medellin. I was able to slip into money right away because I don't compartmentalize like you'll hear a lot of law enforcement undercovers say that they deal with that compartmentalizing. You have to go into the mission long-term, deep undercover, whole. You can't be compartmentalizing. When you meet these guys, you gotta be Manny. And you have to be Manny in a way that you were Manny all your life, your 40 years. So they can see through that if you can project that. Oftentimes, UCEs or undercovers don't know that they're projecting a certain insecurities or whatnot. So, because they try to compartmentalize, when they get back to their base, they are forced to reblue. Reblue means getting back to your normal police duties. But once you do that, you've been honing this blade for years. Then you go back to your base and you dull the blade. So I was lucky to be given the opportunity to constantly improve my trade.
And I will say too, Kyle, I'll just add in terms of Maria.
Yeah.
Maria's pretty badass, right? She is.
She seems it.
She's kind of the unsung hero of this book,
Right.
in that she completely believed in Martin from day one and never questioned his dedication to the undercover technique. But again, Martin can't tell her all the details of a case. All he could tell her when he started going undercover was, if we ever get into a situation in public, just act cool, follow my lead, and we'll be good. So when they're on the beach and this cartel guy says, "Hey, Manny," and they start talking, Maria hears his accent, knows he's Colombian, and she just sits there and nods. "How you doing? Nice to meet you," et cetera, et cetera. And then once he walks away, she turns to Martin and says, "So this is what you've been doing." She's like, don't worry. I know not to say a damn thing." And that was, that was almost Maria's role within the undercover operation, to let Martin do his thing and to trust him wholeheartedly. And that's how he was able to succeed.
Right.
Well, and her strength was evident as you're reading through the pages as well. Go ahead, Martin.
Yeah, I was involved in that same situation other times with my kids and whatnot. We don't discuss it in the book, but it just so happens you have to be prepared for that. You have to make sure that you don't blow your cover over something so simple.
Well, let's go a little deeper into the family dynamic there, because you have a wife, you have your sons. I'll read a couple of quotes from the book that'll help us get into it. At its core, being an undercover agent is about double-crossing people. This nucleus of betrayal, so inherent to the covert technique, acts like a prism, and its refraction hits all aspects of an agent's life. Not only am I betraying the relationships I've built with the drug lords and money launderers, but also that of my own family. Going undercover is a zero-sum game. Justice wins, but everybody else loses. And then there was another quote that, as a father, just like hit me in the gut. Many years later, after my youngest son became a man, we sat down and watched a televised boxing match together. Somehow we got to talking about that time, and he told me the man I loved was never around. When you're working deep undercover, the bad guys dictate your schedule. It's just how it works. And so I've seen a derivative of the same quote or the same feeling for people in the FBI, CIA, military, any type of thing, to where it's like, look, this is dad's job. And it doesn't always work out well with the wife, because there aren't always wives like Maria. It doesn't always work out well with the kiddos, because you can never get that time back. Kids spell love Time, as it's said, and all those different things. But for you, for your wife, for your children now, just talk about the family dynamic, because again, almost everyone in this audience is a civilian. They've never had to be away from their family for long stretches. The longest stretch might be a jiu-jitsu class or a golf outing or something like that. But that just wasn't your life and wasn't your rhythm.
Right. So this is all due to my wife, Maria. She was such not only supportive, and in a lot of ways, she had to tuck her concerns away, but most of the time. But she knew she knew about sacrifices. Her whole family had been in the military. Her dad had deployed to Vietnam 4 or 5 times, so she was used to having their loved ones in harm's way. And so if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't have been able to do this in a convincing way, because I was always be concerned about my life at home. And your wife, if she doesn't agree with what you're doing, especially something that dangerous, you have a hard time, and it projects to everybody, your co-workers and your bad guys, and that could be detrimental to your career and your life. So Maria made sure never to call me. When I was in the street, she never once called me. And because she didn't wanted me to be distracted, she felt that any distraction could cause my life.
Absolutely. And so you're in the smuggling game, you're dealing with all the things there, but at some point you decide, or their decision was made, that we're going to transition from smuggling to money laundering. So I want to read this quote from the book here. By 1991, I had smuggled nearly $1 billion worth of cocaine in the United States for the Medellin cartel. My run undercover in Miami still stands as one of the most successful narcotics investigations of all time. We had gathered more intelligence, seized more drugs, and started the process of indicating more criminal charges that had ever been done before. No one in the history of the FBI had been able to infiltrate a Colombian cartel smuggling operation, much less break up numerous core groups. My work was set to become the basis of how future undercover agents would do their jobs. But at this moment, all I cared about was staying alive. And so, as you talk about in the book, there were some pretty kinetic situations that you were a part of, just part of the smuggling game, I guess, as it were. But for the audience, if you wouldn't mind explaining, okay, the differences between being a smuggler versus a money launderer. You're all part of the same criminal enterprise, but just at different, cogs in the wheel, I guess. What are the different dangers with smuggling versus money laundering? What are the different dangers about being made, right? Smuggling versus money laundering.
So, the the dangers are definitely different between smuggling and money laundering. Money laundering is the heart of the drug traffickers, specifically Colombian drug cartels. So it is the heart and engine of that apparatus. So there are very different threats in each one. If you we always told the cartel, listen, you guys are hot because we had taken down so many loads. I was becoming the common denominator there, and people started lifting their eyebrows. But my pilot and his wife kept me in there. So after seizing down many loads, I did think I could seize another one. Went into money laundering, and it has different challenges. Money is more important than dope to the cartel because money, all the efforts, all the work has been done. And so they safeguard money more than they do the cocaine. I was concerned about anybody who knew that I was receiving $1 million, $2 million a week, that either their competition or a random robbery, that I would be losing the money and get killed, because these guys, once they rip you from the money, they don't want any witnesses for the cartel to track back. So they eliminate you. So I would have to be, say that I was constantly thinking about that. Everything I did was to make sure I didn't fall in that problem. So with smuggling, if you get caught by the cops, of course you go to jail forever. But if you get caught with $1 million in the trunk, they'll seize it, but you won't necessarily go to jail. They have to prove where the money came from. So those are the main differences. Smuggling was tougher in the sense you had to go out there, like I did a few times, to go out to sea, wait for an airdrop, all the logistics that goes into that. And then I created an airstrip and an isolated sugarcane field in Puerto Rico where were invited the cartels to land. So that makes it a lot tougher, all the logistics to do that. When I graduated into money laundering, I felt relief in that the hard work really was nothing compared to that of smuggling.
But I will add, Kyle, Martin's kind of downplaying the danger of being a money launderer here, maybe a little bit. When Martin went undercover as a money launderer, he's working for a high-level peso broker for a cartel. This guy kind of coordinates the money laundering side of the business. And again, these cartels sell billions of dollars worth of cocaine a month. So the amount of money that has to be picked up and processed and transported by Martin during that time is quite frequent. So When you're smuggling, you might do a big load once a month, once every 6 weeks, once every 2 months. But if you're a money launderer, you're picking up millions of dollars a week across 4, 5, 6 pickups every 7 days. So every day it's nonstop. And the proximity to criminals, the proximity to the streets, as Martin is saying, especially in Puerto Rico in the early 1990s, which had a higher murder rate than New York City at the time, is quite dangerous because of that proximity. So as Martin said, anytime you could turn around and some guy is going to blow your head off because he wants to steal your money. Money controls the game, not drugs.
Right.
And so y'all did a, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to add that the peso broker that I worked for was a highly placed guy in the Colombian government. And when I started laundering for him, he told me that, listen, Manny, I trust you, and you came with good recommendations, but I want you to know that I can reach across the world. I have a long arm, and I can touch you on the shoulder anytime. So then it's not like the Italian mafia. They said they're going to kill you, they're going to take your heart out with a spoon, all this. No, they very casually tell you what's going to happen to you without really getting at that level, without getting into the nastiness of the whole thing.
Yeah, well, that's not terrifying at all. But you know that you're talking about the dangers. You're elucidating the dangers of this, and so there's clearly the hazards of the job. But then there's also the dangers of temptation, right? Because you've seen people, and we've heard stories of people that go undercover, and they just can't stop themselves from getting a taste. Whether it's a taste of the product, a taste of the money, a taste of the largesse of the life that they've kind of created around their alter ego or things like that. So what was the temptation like for you? Because, yeah, you're dealing with product that could be turned into cash for yourself. Obviously, you have the FBI strictures and things like that. But there's ways to get around everything. But then also when you start dealing with millions and millions and millions and tens and hundreds of millions worth of dollars, like, what is the temptation like?
Yeah, and you know, I didn't hear much about that in the FBI. Yes, there have been some cases, but when you get selected to go undercover in the Bureau, you get all these psychological screening and tests and whatnot. You have to get this every 6 months, and they delve deep into your psyche. So you're vetted in that way. And then I couldn't do something like that, especially for my father, who admired me and loved me so, and my family. But I thought I would wear from the beginning, we always talked about wearing the white hat. And the white hat meant that we were going to be honorable, noble, and keep our oath above all.
Yeah, and I think that for a lot of people, I talk about pre-decision a lot on my show. So, you know, exercising. I don't wake up in the morning and then evaluate in my warm bed when I'm tired, man, am I going to work out today? Well, no, I've already pre-decided. I pre-decided yesterday that I'm going to work out today, so I'm going to do what discipline requires of me. Same thing in a situation like that when it comes to a moral code or a white hat code or a family honor code of something like that. It's like, no, the decision's already been made. We just need to perform the actions now. But there were several points in stories in the book, Martin, where, you know, again, we kind of get this Hollywoodized version of wearing the wire or not wearing the wire and the risk of wearing the wire and all the different things. But you kind of had to have a feel of when it was a good time to wear a recording device, right, and when it was a time to wear, like, something's off here. I don't feel good about wearing this device, but that's a required device if you want to get the evidence that you need to eventually take these people down, even if it's brick by brick. So how did you handle the when to wear a wire, when not to wear a wire?
Yes, it's a very personal decision. The FBI doesn't force you to wear a wire. Your investigation is taken in consideration, but they're using a bunch of other techniques to gather the same evidence if they can. Although the evidence gained undercover is probably the best evidence you can get, because it's hard to impeach an undercover man on the stand. But also, you have to balance when to wear it and when to not wear it. It gets a little, perhaps that's the worst part of the undercover technique. But what I always used to do if I felt threatened and decided to ditch my wire, I would then meet the person a few times after, and then I would retrace what we spoke about the first day we met. And that worked out well for me, but I don't know anybody else that did that. They try to get the best evidence they can at the time, but then they end up not getting any evidence because they were so tight about the wire that they lost concentration on the meeting. If I didn't have a wire, I was flowing free, and I was concentrating on what I was doing.
Well, I will add that there's a huge kind of benefit culturally based on the wire and this sort of operation, is that men in the early 90s in Puerto Rico especially, but in a large amount of Hispanic cultures, carried satchels. Right. And there was like a business code with high-end cartel dudes where it was like, you don't touch my bag, I don't touch your bag. It's like a code. So instead of wiring it up on his chest or something like that, Martin was able just to stick it in his bag, go to a dinner meeting, throw it on the table, and just let it run. And, and that's another indication. I mean, I always like to say this to people, like, this book is incredible. The story is incredible. And Martin's skill level is like, bar none. But so much of the success as to what happened was time and place. Right. Perfect time, perfect place, perfect target. All the things came together. And even small details like these dudes wore satchels. I mean, that was just that was such a positive sort of thing that allowed evidence collection via the wire.
Well, and I've heard it said before, luck is the residue of hard work. And so there's a lot of hard work that goes into those perfect times, perfect meetings, perfect places, and all that kind of stuff. But it wasn't always perfect. And there were times where you felt like, oh man, this might be coming to an end soon. I might be coming to an end soon. And so I'll just tell you, both of you guys have ruined red Honda Civics for me for the rest of my life. Okay. So every time I see a red Honda Civic, I'm going to think something's going down. It's not going to be beneficial for humanity. So let's talk about the guys that pulled up. This is when you're still in the game, right? You're still in the game. The investigation had not wrapped yet. And there were some occurrences that started to happen to made you think, geez, I may have been made. They may be coming for me.
Yeah, there were a lot of situations, probably 10 or 12, where I thought this can't be a coincidence. And so in that case, with the red Honda Civic, I remember clearly because I can never forget it. But I can never forget any of the iffy moments, the moments that I got full of courage without having a reason to. I should have just let it go and not pursue the bad guy or something like that. But your training and what you're supposed to do takes over. But in this case, I felt that these people at least knew where I lived. I didn't know who they were. And then I saw them later, really late at night, a few times. So, and there was one time that Maria had to witness some of it, and I felt bad for that. But
well, Martin, she didn't just witness some of it. The guys came up to you with the kids and said,
right.
"We're gonna fucking kill you."
Right.
That's not. I mean, Jesus, you know. And then Martin obviously had to whisk Maria and the boys off into a secret cabin in the woods. I mean, you know, you talk about a Hollywood story, but you know, it was real. And Martin's point of view on this, and that I can't tell this is a coincidence. That is the kind of deep-seated inherent paranoia and hypervigilance, as Martin puts it, of working undercover. At night, all the cats are black, right? And that was a mantra that Martin lived by towards the end of this operation as danger crept closer to his doorstep.
Right.
And so you're living this life. You had been doing this for a very, very long time. You were very successful at it. But at some point, the investigation had to come to a close, and it did. So I'll read this quote from the book. In August 1994, shortly after my meeting with U.S. Attorney Gill, the FBI called the investigation complete. I could finally become Martin Suarez again. We were done. I never went back to my undercover apartment. I threw all of my doper gear and money laundering garb away. I crushed my undercover phones and turned my wire over to Santo. I would never again need to visit the restaurants, bars, and shady neighborhoods where I picked up money. I did my last switch into Martin, and this 2-year saga was over. For all intents and purposes, Manny had disappeared. I erased him. He was a ghost. So let's talk about the two sides of wrapping the investigation. One, what happened on the legal side with the people that were involved that you were, undercover investigating. And then, gosh, just the relief, I guess. Or maybe it was sad, almost like a little bit of a macabre funeral type of a thing where you had to kind of kill your alter ego before it killed you. Let's talk about both sides.
So when that case closed, what I don't mention in the book, but Ian knows about it, I was working 4 or 5 different cases under cameo cases as opposed to deep undercover. So I closed many and then I became somebody else, moved to Miami and started continued that undercover work. At times I had 11 undercover names, used mostly 10, and I was working operations around the world. I was working in Germany, Poland, Holland, Spain, Thailand, Philippines, Japan. So I was all over the place. So it was easy to say goodbye to Manny because I didn't have time to grieve Manny. But I loved the case, the action. I loved my source in Puerto Rico, was a good man, just got caught up in the wrong side. But when I asked him to wear the white hat, he didn't blink. He just jumped on the wagon with me. From that point on, he looked out for me. I could tell, because he didn't do anything to embarrass the Bureau or me.
And I'll add, Kyle, with the case, just to put this into perspective, that money laundering investigation in Puerto Rico resulted in over 50 indictments of high-level cartel targets. And these guys were the people that brought millions of dollars of cocaine through Puerto Rico and into the United States and then helped launder the money back to Colombia. But within this operation, it wasn't just about the amount of money that was seized or the indictments that were secured. It was the intelligence that was gathered. And that's another aspect of Martin's undercover work, is that it's not just playing a role to, secure an indictment to get a conviction. It is trying to understand how the cartels do what they do.
Right.
How do they smuggle? How do they launder? How does this business actually work from the inside? And one of the main components that the U.S. government didn't really have a lot of knowledge about was the money laundering. So when Martin goes in, the real crown jewel of this case, sure, was the indictments, but it was understanding that the cartels at that time used what was called the black market peso exchange. And the black market peso exchange was the apparatus that translated American dollars made from drug sales in the U.S. into merchandise that could be smuggled back into Colombia, sold for pesos, and put back into the cartel's coffers. No one had known that this type of thing existed. No one knew that it involved major banks. No one knew that it involved politicians. And Martin uncovered all of that. So it's funny. And when you go back and you trace all of the sort of notices and all the education from the Treasury Department, from Customs, from the FBI, from FINRA, from the SEC about money laundering, all of this education really started coming out in 1994 when this case closed, because Martin is the one who uncovered it. He uncovered, just through boots on the ground, undercover police work, that this is how the cartels move money around the globe. And members of the State Department had said in the 90s, this is the most insidious money laundering apparatus ever created. And Martin was the person to uncover it.
It's absolutely unprecedented to that time. Go ahead, Martin.
First of all, the reason why I had some success is because I always chose my cases. I always chose the higher echelon cases that would not force me to do unsavory things like taking drugs or beating up somebody or something like that. But when it comes to the drug cartels, money laundering apparatus, sorry, I'm getting a little tired, but I'm enjoying every minute. So that system is untraceable. It's silent. It's perfect. And unless you have an undercover agent inside the cartel, the money laundering side of it, you will never know that existed. And even if you know that exists, unless you have an undercover agent, you don't know how they're doing, where they're doing, and because it's untraceable, and that the best component of the money laundering scheme is that money never crosses borders. Dollars stay in the States, and the pesos stay in Colombia. So it's untraceable if you have no money to go after. That cliche that says follow the money, that doesn't work with the Colombian cartel.
Absolutely. And I mean, it's just invaluable, the amount of information and intel and tradecraft that you were able to garner. And Martin, you did it. You got out scot-free, no issues, right? You have all your teeth, you have all your fingers, all the things. Oh, wait, except for there was this one day. And y'all do a great job of this. You ruin everybody's life because they read about it at the very beginning of the book, and then they got to, go through the rest of it to get to the end of the story. But there you are. You'd gone on a run because you're a dutiful individual. You got to stay in shape, right? And everybody understands the euphoria after you get done running. Let's go to the quote here from the book. I grabbed a chair, took a seat, and kept breathing. But then I heard tss, tss, tss. The voice came from behind me, the venom on his tongue, unmistakable. When I turned around, I knew he was a sicario, a hitman sent to kill me. He wore black gloves and a gray mask, two black marble eyes staring back at me. He raised his arm and pointed his pistol, a Smith & Wesson revolver, at my chest. I could see the bullets in the chamber. He had been waiting for me, obscured within a low-hanging row of cat palms. So At this point, he wants to take you inside because that's part of the thing. It's not just about killing the target. It's about maximum amount of despair. So the family will come home, wife and kids will be able to discover your body. So, you think it was your former cartel contact, Toro, that sent this assassin. And as mentioned earlier in this interview, he had previously said, and Manny, always remember that I can reach out across the world at any time and touch your shoulder. And so here you are. You've got a gun pointed at your chest. The guy's like, all right, let's go in the house. You take it from here.
The first thing I thought of was Toro Negro, what he said, I'm touching you on the shoulder right now. It was pretty, at first I got up from the chair, raised my arms and hands, and I was gonna run, but he made sure that I understood that I wasn't gonna outrun his bullets. So I had to sit down and take it for a while. The abuse, the verbal abuse, and the pushing and smacking and all that on the chair, because the whole time I was planning how am I gonna get out of this without getting shot, and that was the whole thinking at the time. Nothing else but how am I gonna get away, and I thought of a lot of plans. And the only one that I knew was going to work was the one that I employed. And I explained it in the book that then I had a lot of luck too. So I've been a lucky man my whole career, my life. So.
And so you're able to actually survive the situation. Obviously, you get into great detail in the book. You looked for the right opportunity to make the right move. You're able to disengage from him, create some space, and then eventually you're able to make your way through that situation and make it out alive. And, again, this has got to be kind of like messing with your mind a little bit, because it's like, I'm finally out, but then to another degree, you're never out, because this is still very close to the situation. There are people that are still on the outside that can reach out and touch you, as it were, at any time. So just a couple of questions left before we wrap. I'm curious now, because you kept doing Undercover, as you said. I think you retired in 2011 with plenty of accolades that I talked about in the introduction. But when you look at what's happening right now, with the Mexican drug cartels, with cartels spread throughout Central and South America, with drugs coming in, again, as a civilian, as a non-drug user, I think to myself, yeah, it makes a lot of sense that we would send Delta Force or Navy SEALs or Marine Recon or somebody in to go dismantle some of these networks and take them out, just like we would have tried to do with Al-Qaeda or ISIS or any other group that we've been in conflict with, because of the amount of people that are overdosing, the amount of people that are being poisoned with fentanyl in this country. It's not an insignificant number. It is ruining families. It's ruining lives. It's ruining entire communities. The cost to Americans is substantial with the healthcare costs, and there's all kinds of different things. Okay. But I don't know anything. You know a whole lot about this game and everything. So from your perspective, how is the United States doing on the, I guess we can still call it the war on drugs? And specifically, if you had a magic wand and could dictate how we do policy and missions as it pertains to the current cartels, what would you do?
The big mistake that our administrations engage in is that they tend to use a machete when they should use a scalpel. And undercovers are scalpels, and they make those fine incisions penetrate in a way that nobody knows who they are, and they gather tons of information that you would never gather, let's say, for example, on surveillance or wiretaps or this or that. You can go to trial on an undercover case that use all the techniques, and they'll get tapes thrown out because they're talking about loaves of bread and not kilos. Well, when the agent testified, the undercover agent, and he says, matter of fact, we called the kilos in this organization loaves of bread. That's it. They have no defense against that. So that's
Well,
why.
Kyle, I'll also add, Martin, me and Martin and I talk about this all the time. And the way Martin put it to me was, well, the war on drugs never really started.
Right.
Right? Guys like Martin were the scalpels that were in there, but you can't do much with just one scalpel. I mean, the way Martin and I talk about it too, especially in the context of now, and, President Trump has said a lot about what he wants to do to the Mexican cartels. But if you're holding a hammer, everything's a nail. That doesn't work either. Right. You have to have almost a holistic approach where you have overt tactics and then covert tactics. Like we talked about with Martin's success 35 years ago, so much of that was intelligence work. So much of that was, presenting the magic trick. Too much muscle can have the opposite effect.
Right.
But again, it has to be a continuous, ongoing, agreed upon stance that transcends administration. You can't dismantle a cartel in under 4 years. I mean, this is going to take a long time. But to your point, Kyle, these cartels are stronger than they've ever been. I mean, you look at the numbers coming in from the UN or the US in terms of drugs that are being transported to Europe or up to North America. It's ridiculous. It really is. So to that point, I always ask Martin, do you feel like you had an impact? And Martin says yes, because what he was able to do was prove that the covert technique is the best technique. And all it takes is a couple undercovers, right place, right time, right now, to go in and be those scalpels again.
And it's the cheapest way to go to.
It's also cheap because
it's paying for one guy's meals,
Right. But also too, when you do a seizure, you're funding the operation with the cartel's money. All that theatrics Martin did, all the boats and all that, cartel paid for that.
Right.
They were taking bites out of their own tail. So that's kind of the irony of these sorts of things too, is that, the taxpayers don't pay anything for covert technique a lot of the time.
Right.
Martin, if you had to guess, do we have guys currently in with Mexican cartels now?
I'm not sure. The climate now is risk averse. And every time they think of Mexico, they think of Kike Camarena, and who got killed, tortured, and killed in Mexico. But there are too many people looking out for their careers instead of employing the best techniques to combat narcotics, drugs. So when the career people get in the middle, if they get high enough, they're going to sabotage your case by not approving certain things that if they went sideways, those things would embarrass them and they wouldn't get promoted. So, when I started working undercover, my management were just the most incredible people in that they swore an oath and they lived that, and they stretched the envelope for the American people, no matter if they meant that they had to sacrifice by committing a mistake and having to pay for it. They didn't care. And they gave me all this rope to hang myself, really, but they never stopped me. They always encouraged me to continue. You would be hard-pressed to find that now.
All right, well, let's wrap up with something that we mentioned earlier, and it's your relationship with your father, and give you a chance to honor your father, because your dad, wanted to, the military stuff, y'all had that in common. He wanted to be an agent, but he wasn't. And you could feel the pride your father had when you called him and told him that you were an agent, that you're a special agent, and just you could just tell that he was so proud of his son, because some dads actually come to resent their sons because their sons are successful and they're doing the things that they weren't allowed to do. But a dad that's got his head screwed on straight realizes that your point on this earth that's what legacy is. It's to set up the next generation. That's what legacy is in a nutshell. Right. So let's just talk about your special relationship with your father and how proud he was of the work you did in your career.
So my father was a fantastic man. Although he didn't accomplish the things he admired, the careers that he admired and I did, he was a much better man than I was, in that he never showed any jealousy, only support, and that he was just such an honorable man that his character and integrity overshadowed all of my accomplishments. That's how great he was.
That's fantastic. Well, I'm just so thankful that I got to spend this time with you both. I really appreciate the effort that was put into the book and the effort that you did in your service to this country with the military and also with the FBI. But as of now, that's all for me. Is there anything else you guys want to get off your chests?
I feel blessed. I'm colleagues with Ian, and that he got what I was telling him. And it was such an easy process. It makes it a lot of fun.
Just doing my job. I mean, the story tells itself, and it's been such a pleasure and an honor for me to be able to be the steward of Martin's story, because he's an American hero, and finally he's agreed to go public with what he did for this country. So the pleasure's all mine. And thank you, Kyle, for having us.
Right.
Yeah, very good. Thanks for coming on, guys.
Okay. Bye.
There you go, guys. I hope you enjoyed my time with Martin and Ian. But before we let you go, we are going to do a quick resilience boost. At Undaunted.Life, our mission is equipping men to push back darkness with content that forges spiritual, mental, and physical resilience. So in the show notes, I got a link to Amazon where you can buy your copy of Inside the Cartel. Thank you for listening to this podcast. Wherever you're listening to this, please subscribe, rate, and leave us a positive 5-star review. If you want me to come speak live at your event or on your podcast, just shoot me an email to info@Undaunted.Life. That's info@Undaunted.Life. Follow us on Instagram and like us on Facebook, and check out our website for everything else, including how to donate to keep more content like this coming your way. Just go to www.Undaunted.Life. And as always, we want to thank the band Holy Name for allowing us to use their music for our content. The music on this podcast is their song Perpetua, which is off their self-titled debut album on Face Down Records. The links are in the description. I'm your host, Kyle Thompson. Remember, keep pushing back darkness, keep forging spiritual, mental, and physical resilience, keep seeking the Lion of Judah.